Genesis chapter 29. The soap opera continues. Bunch of messed up people here, right? Dysfunction Junction is what we ought to name Genesis, right? Dysfunction Junction. So these people are messed up and God's going to use them anyway. All right, we want to move on now to, we found out that Jacob and his relationship with Rebekah, we found out last week that it just kind of bring you up and to speed on this, that Jacob is a beguiler, a deceiver, a supplanter, snake oil salesman. You name it, he's it. And yet God has chosen Jacob to be the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. And so Jacob thinks he might bring that through Rebekah, this fox that he married, but no, it's not Rebekah, or Rachel rather. It is Leah. So Jacob is sowing all kinds of wild oats, and we're going to find out tonight from Genesis chapter 29, beginning in verse 31, through the next couple chapters, the soap opera continues. And this section here, I've just kind of subtitled it, Frenetic Fertility. Frenetic fertility, because this is what we're going to read tonight, okay?
How do you spell
so
that?
we're dealing frenetic fertility. Frenetic. Okay, verse 31 of chapter 29. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah conceived, gave birth to a son, and named him Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has seen my affliction. Surely my husband will love me now." Now, isn't that interesting? Leah knows that Jacob doesn't really love her. So, guess what? Maybe I'll give him a child and he'll love me more. You ever hear that story?
Yeah.
You ever hear about girls just getting pregnant because they're not sure if the guy loves them?
Yeah.
Well, if I have a child, maybe he'll love me more. That'll just be the tie that binds. Right? Same old story here. Leah is going to go after Jacob. She's going to make sure she gives him sons because she is feeling unloved. Okay? And according to Scripture, she wasn't the most beautiful woman to look at, evidently. Okay? She was probably a little bit homely. She had Betty Davis eyes, I think we determined, right? She had Betty Davis eyes. Wow. So, anyway, so verse 33, she conceived again, gave birth to a son, and said, "The Lord heard that I am unloved, and has given me this son also." So she named him Simeon. She conceived again, gave birth to a son, and said, at last, my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore, he was named Levi. Verse 35, and she conceived again. Like rabbits. Gave birth to a son and said, "This time I will praise the Lord." Therefore she named him Judah, which Judah means praise the Lord. Then Leah stopped having children. Wow. I mean, within 3 verses here, she's had 4 sons. I mean, that's rapid fire, isn't it?
Year after year.
But you see what's going on, though. Like I said, she knew she wasn't loved by Jacob. But in that agricultural society, one of the greatest things you could have as far as resources was to have a bunch of sons. I mean, that's free labor, right?
My dad had sons.
Yeah.
He had 8 sons.
Yeah, did he? Okay. Okay. So was your dad a farmer?
Yes. That's what
See,
your country people want.
that's right.
A bunch of sons
That's
so they
right.
can work in the field.
Sometimes that's better than having the cattle. You got to have the people to work in the fields. So anyway, so now Jacob's going to love her, right? Jacob's going to love her more than Rachel, right? Not a fat chance. No way. No, it's not going to happen anyway. Okay, let's go on to chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she envied her sister. Now, who does that remind you of?
Cain and Abel.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. How about Sarah and Hagar?
Abraham.
Remember, same thing. Once Hagar had children through Abraham, Sarah said, get this woman out of my tent, out of my sight, right? Verse 2, Jacob became angry with Rachel. Oh, wait a minute. She said, not bearing Jacob any children, she envied her sister. Give me sons or I will die, she said to Jacob. So that's pretty desperate, right? I can't go on if you don't give me some sons. Jacob became angry with Rachel and said, am I in God's place who has withheld children from you? So evidently he was intimate with Rachel, but they just couldn't have children. But Leah, boy, he looked at her and she gets pregnant. You know. Verse 3, then she said, here's my slave Bilhah. Go sleep with her and she'll bear children for me so that through her I too can build a family. Sounds like Sarah all over again, doesn't it? So Rachel gave her slave Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, and he slept with her. Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Rachel said, God has vindicated me. Yes, he has heard me and given me a son, and she named him Dan. Verse 7, Rachel's slave Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Rachel said, in my wrestlings with God, I have wrestled with my sister and won, and she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her slave Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Can you believe this? I mean, can you believe this is a soap opera, folks?
It's almost a good time.
Jacob was having a one time of his life, wasn't he? I
He
mean,
was rocking, I'm telling you.
he was a rock star.
rocking.
I mean, good grief.
Oh my
He
God.
had his own hair on it, you know it.
Yep, you got that
We
right.
walked past his tent, they called it the hen house.
Yep.
That's right.
Oh my gosh.
He was
Gosh. Verse 11, then Leah said, what good fortune, and she named him Gad. When Leah's slave Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, Leah said, I am happy that the women call me happy. So she named him Asher. Verse 14, Reuben went out during the wheat harvest. Now Reuben is the first child of Leah, if you'll remember, okay? So Reuben went out during the wheat harvest, and he found some mandrakes in the field. When he brought them to his mother Leah, Rachel asked, now this is Rachel, not his mom Leah. Rachel asked, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But Leah replied to her, isn't it enough that you have taken my husband? Now you also want to take my son's mandrakes? Well, Rachel said, you can sleep with him tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes. Man, I tell you what, this is a crew here, isn't it? When Jacob came in from the field that evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come with me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes. So Jacob slept with her that night.
What a guy.
God,
What a guy. I'm telling you.
What's a mandrake?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Some kind of food, I'm not sure.
Fertility.
Does any of your other translations have anything that's...
It's not in my translation,
It's
but
not in mine
but
either.
in
If it
another,
helps, I've got a little description of what mandrakes are.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right, now I'm reading.
I hope it's not a fertility drug.
Well, that's exactly what it is.
Is it?
Yeah, it says,
oh my God.
yeah, here we go, mandrakes. See if you find this at your grocer's counter. It says, a plant possessing tuberous roots resembling human torsos. The mandrake was thought to enhance one's sexual powers and fertility.
That's what Jacob needed.
If Leah, still lonely and desperate for her husband's affection, bartered some of the mandrakes with Jacob's favorite wife Rachel, for the right to sleep with Jacob for a night.
Oh my gosh.
Uh,
So it's natural Viagra.
I guess.
Yeah, that's what my Bible says. It was an aphrodisiac
Aphrodisiac.
and stimulant.
Hey, but seriously, you go back, you think about these people, the more kids they had, it did them well in their family. I mean, it's just, the more kids you had, especially sons.
We never had a girl so far.
Well, they're getting ready to here in just a minute. I think maybe the testosterone is abating a little bit because they have a daughter here in just a minute.
They gotta have some girls raised.
Gotta have some girls for all these guys. I mean, let's see, where did I stop off at? Okay, so, well said Rachel, so verse 16. When Jacob came in from the field that evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come with me, for I've hired you with my son's mandrake." So Jacob slept with her. God listened to Leah,
Oh, shoot.
and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. So the mandrakes worked. Because it said she stopped having children, and now,
Here we go.
wow.
Yeah,
I'm,
I bet there was a run on mandrakes.
I bet it
now look,
was
folks,
too.
you know what? We've been saying God needs to send us young families. So maybe we need to go out, some of you folks, and find some mandrakes.
They're going to say, we need to offer some mandrakes.
I'm just
You like
saying.
mushroom hunting?
Well,
I'm too old to be using that stuff.
Man, this sounds like I bet this is something David Koresh preached from all the time. Or Jim Jones.
Yeah.
So, anyway. So he says, let's see, where am I here? Which one? 18. Okay, so Leah said, "God has rewarded me for giving my slave to my husband," and she named him Issachar. Then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. "God has given me a good gift," Leah said. This time my husband my husband will honor me, because I borne him 6 sons. Not only was she homely, she was dumb.
Sorry.
I mean, come on, right?
Figured it out yet.
She hadn't figured it out yet. Having kids is not going to make him love her more than Rachel. Oh my gosh.
I know.
It doesn't say in here she was a blonde, does it? I'm sorry. Forgive me. Please forgive me. Okay. Verse 21. Later, here we go, Bonnie. Later, Leah bore a daughter and named her Dinah. There you go. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said, "God has taken away my shame." She named him Joseph. Comes on the scene finally. After all this stuff going on, Joseph breaks out on the scene. "May the Lord add another son to me." Okay, and eventually we'll find out she does have another son. Okay, all right, so that's pretty interesting, right? So that's all Jacob, and man, he's just creating his own nation of people. And like I say, the thing about you got to understand about Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel come from Jacob. So it's important to understand that, once again, God chose his people and the Jewish people and the Messiah to come through Jacob and to come through Leah. But this group right here, this is how the Messiah comes. So God had to choose people for God to become flesh and incarnate himself in human beings. And this is his family tree. Okay? All right. Any questions or comments before we go on? All right. All right, verse 25. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban. So he's still with Laban, his father-in-law. Okay? He's having all these kids. His family's growing, and he's still with his father-in-law. So Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so that I can return to my homeland. Give me my wives and my children that I have worked for, and let me go. You know how hard I have worked for you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your sight, stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." Then Laban said, "Name your wages and I will pay them." So Jacob said to him, "You know what I have done for you and your herds. For you had very little before I came, but now your wealth has increased. The Lord has blessed you because of me. And now when I also do something for, and now when will I also be able to do something for my own family?" Laban asked, "What should I give you?" And Jacob said, "You don't need to give me anything. If you do this one thing for me." Now Jacob is a schemer. And he's getting ready to come up with a pretty good scheme here for Laban. So this gets really interesting. He says, if you do this one thing for me, I will continue to shepherd and keep your flock. Let me go through all your sheep today and remove every sheep that is speckled or spotted, every dark-colored sheep among the lambs, and the spotted and the speckled among the female goats. Such will be my wages. In the future, when you come to check on my wages, my honesty will testify for me. If I have any female goats that are not speckled or spotted, or any lambs that are not black, they will be considered stolen. Okay? So he just said, give me all your marked animals. I'll take the marked ones. I'll take the defects, okay, if you will. Verse 34, good, said Laban, let it be as you have said. That day Laban removed the streaked and the spotted male goats and all the speckled and spotted female goats, every one that had any white on it, and every dark-colored sheep among the lambs, and he placed his sons in charge of them. In other words, he wanted his sons to shepherd them and make sure they stayed together and quarantined, if you will. And then verse 37, Jacob then took branches of fresh poplar, almond, and plane wood, and peeled the bark, exposing white stripes on the branches. He set the peeled branches in the troughs in front of the sheep in the water channels where the sheep came to drink. And the sheep bred when they came to drink. The flocks bred in front of the branches and bore streaked, speckled, and spotted young.
Wow.
So Jacob knew a little bit about zoology and genetics as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So he had a plan here. And I don't know how that works out. You know, once again, didn't know anything about mandrakes either, but where he set these peeled branches, so he put stripes all around the water, and when they start drinking this water and they were breeding, their offspring came out striped and speckled. And these were Laban's sheep now. So he's taken away from Laban. He's already got the spot, but he's increasing his flock by actually mutating Laban's flocks. So it says here, verse 39, the flocks bred in front of the branches and bore streaked, speckled, and spotted young. Jacob separated lambs and made the flocks face the streaked and the completely dark sheep in Laban's flocks. Then he set his own stock apart and did not put them with Laban's sheep. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob placed the branches in the troughs in full view of the flocks, and they would breed in front of the branches. As for the weaklings of the flocks, he did not put out the branches. So it turned out that the weak sheep belonged to Laban and the stronger ones to Jacob.
What a good man.
And the man became very rich. He had many flocks, male and female slaves, and camels and donkeys. So you see, Jacob was pretty devious. And he was known to be devious. Remember, he came out of the womb hanging on to his brother Esau's ankle, and it never stopped. He always had a plan. He was always running. He was always trying to cheat somebody out of something. You know? What is it they say? Some criminals are some of the smartest people in the world because they have to constantly outthink the law and stay in front of people. But, you know, if they would only turn that around for good. But your best criminals are pretty brilliant people. Jacob here is just not presented as a very nice guy. I mean, he's just not. But that's who God chooses. Right? This is who God is choosing. Okay.
We should give the rest of us hope.
What's that?
We should give the rest of us hope.
That's right. That's right. You know, God doesn't want us to boast about how good we are or how we deserve who we are in Christ. None of us deserve it. All right, chapter 31. Now Jacob heard what Laban's sons were saying. Jacob has taken all that was our father's and has built this wealth what belonged to our father. And Jacob saw from Laban's face that his attitude to him was not the same anymore. So Laban's pretty ticked. And he's seeing his flock that he had a lot of is now suddenly been bred out to Jacob. And he's lost a lot of his wealth. He's not happy. Verse 3, then the Lord said to him, go back to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. He's talking about Jacob. And Jacob had Rachel and Leah called to the field where his flocks were. He said to them, I can see from your father's face that his attitude toward me is not the same. But the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked hard for your father, and that he has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. Now, I don't remember him doing it 10 times. Does anybody remember, did he cheat him 10 times? Or is Jacob stretching the truth just a little bit?
A little bit.
He cheated him twice because he promised him Rachel, and he worked 7 years and he got Leah, right?
Then he promised.
And then he had to work another 7 years to get Rachel. So I mean, maybe cheated him twice, but not 10 times. So here he's manipulating his wives to say, you need to break away from your dad, right? That's what he's doing. He's a scoundrel. So, let's see, verse 10. But God has not let him harm me. If he said, the spotted sheep will be your wages, then all the sheep were born spotted. If he said, the streaked sheep will be your wages, then all the sheep were born streaked. So he's blaming this on Laban. Jacob is telling his wives now, Laban's daughters, it's your dad's fault that all of his flocks became my sheep. Right? He's saying as Laban spoke it into agreement, it happened. He said the streak, let's see, verse 10. The streaked sheep will be your wages, then all the sheep were born streaked. God has taken your father's herds and given them to me. Verse 10, when the flocks were breeding, I saw in a dream that the streaked, spotted, and speckled males were mating with the females. In that dream, the angel of God said to me, Jacob? And I said, here I am. And he said, look up and see, all the males that are mating with the flocks are streaked, spotted, and speckled, for I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you poured oil on the stone marker and made a solemn vow to me. Get up, leave this land, and return to your native land. So now Jacob explains how he got the idea. He got it from the Lord. He got this idea about the sheep and all that from the Lord. Then Rachel and Leah answered him, do we have any portion or inheritance in our father's household? Are we not regarded by him as outsiders? For he has sold us and certainly spent our money. In fact, all the wealth that God has taken from our father belongs to us and our children, so do whatever God has said to you. So he's convinced them, your dad cheated me and he's a scoundrel too. Right? That's basically what he's telling them. Then Jacob got up and put his children and wives on the camels. He took all the livestock and possessions he had acquired in Paddan Aram and drove his herds to the land of his father Isaac in Canaan. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household idols. And Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean, not telling him that he was fleeing. So Jacob is taking off, and he's not telling Laban, we're leaving, we're departing, we're out of here. Okay? So he just leaves without, giving him a 2 weeks notice. He fled with all his possessions, crossed the Euphrates, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. So on the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. So he took his relatives with him, pursued Jacob for 7 days, and overtook him at Mount Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night. Watch yourself, God warned him. Don't say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. See, Jacob's chosen. God has chosen him. and he's protecting him even though he's cheated his father-in-law who cheated him. But so saying two wrongs don't make a right, this time two wrongs evidently make a right, because God has chosen Jacob. So verse 25, when Laban overtook Jacob, Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban and his brothers also pitched their tents in the hill country of Gilead. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You've deceived me and taken my daughters away like prisoners of war. Why did you secretly flee from me, deceive me, and not tell me? I would have sent you away with joy and singing, with tambourines and lyres, but you didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters. You have acted foolishly. I could do you great harm, but last night the God of your father said to me, 'Watch yourself, don't say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.' Now you have gone off because you long for your father, but why have you stolen my gods?" So, even though he wasn't supposed to say anything or confront him, what's near and dear to Laban? His gods. You see that? Because he said, "The God of your father spoke to me," and he's still mad that Jacob took away his gods. That's kind of crazy, isn't it?
It says that Rachel took his God.
She did, but
So is that
but he's responsible for Rachel. That's his wife.
Okay.
You've taken your party. Anybody in his entourage, even his slaves, that's his responsibility.
And why would Rachel even do that? His statues or
I don't know.
thought?
I'm not sure. I don't know why she would do that. And I'm not sure if Scripture ever tells us why. Of course, in those days, women didn't have a voice. They just didn't, they did whatever was done, and that's the way it was. They didn't really have a voice in anything. So verse 31, Jacob answered, "I was afraid, for I thought you would take your daughters from me by force." So he's saying basically, if he didn't know, Laban probably never dreamt that Jacob would leave that land and leave the family. You know, as much as they cheated each other and had all kinds of drama going on, he never dreamt that Jacob just one day get up and leave. And that upset him. Okay?
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
So, the women, the daughters, said, "Well, you've taken all of our wealth," because he took everything from their father, so maybe she took the gods or whatever she took.
Yeah, maybe,
for all
perhaps.
their wealth.
Yeah. See, and the thing about that culture too, all the ladies had a dowry. And they would save up, and they had whatever they worked for, they didn't keep for themselves. They put it aside for a dowry. So that when they did marry, they had something to bring to the marriage. So that, you know, when you start out a marriage, if you start out a marriage and you marry poor, it's tough. It's tougher on a marriage when you stay poor, when you're poor. So the idea was to have a little bit of money in a nest egg, so that when you got, that your financial worries weren't a stressor against your marital relationship. So all these women had dowries, so evidently Laban had even taken their dowry according to Rachel. Yeah,
Yeah,
so evidently that's, so she was resentful of that.
yeah.
I have a picture of these little statues, and it says these are household gods similar to those Rachel stole. They're
Yeah.
little cross statues. Pretty wild.
No.
Yeah. Most of them look like birds' heads.
Well, and that's just it. And you know, in a lot of pagan religions worship creation, and even the native Indians. So they were pantheists. Most of the people back in those days were pantheists. They believed God was in everything. And so there were many gods. There was the God of the sun, the God of the water, the God of the grass, you know. And so what made Judaism so unique was they were monotheistic. There was only one true God, creator of the universe. He was not in creation, he was above creation. And that was completely foreign to almost every pagan religion of that day. So that did make them holy and separate in that respect.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, where was that here? Okay, so then it says, so, verse 33, oh, and it says, Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the idols. Did I read that part yet? Oh, okay then. Verse 32 then. Jacob says, if you find your gods with anyone here, he will not live. Oh man. The love of his life. He's getting ready to pronounce a sentence on her. Right?
We need music.
We need some violin playing in the background or something. Before our relatives point out anything that is not yours and take it. Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the idols. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, then Leah's tent, and then the tents of the two female slaves, but he found nothing. Then he left Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken Laban's household idols, put them in the saddlebag of the camel, and sat on them. Laban searched the whole tent, but found nothing. She said to her father, Sir, don't be angry that I cannot stand up in your presence. I am having my monthly period. So Laban searched, but could not find the household idols. So she says that she's sitting on the camel, on the saddlebag, and she can't get up because she's having her period.
Mine says pregnant. Mine says because I am pregnant.
Well,
Mine says period.
Yeah.
yeah.
One being on a camel either way, sorry.
Well, either way, she was using her maternal,
Yeah.
Or feminine.
aspects to ward off her dad for opening up that saddlebag. Okay, then verse 36, then Jacob became incensed and brought charges against Laban. So now Jacob, because he couldn't find anything, right? What is my crime, he said to Laban. What is my sin that you have pursued me? You have searched all my possessions. Have you found anything of yours? Put it here before my relatives and yours, and let them decide between the two of us. I've been with you for these 20 years. Your ewes and female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams from your flock. I did not bring you any of the flock torn by wild beasts. I myself bore the loss. You demanded payment from me for what was stolen by day or by night. There I was. The heat consumed me by day and the frost by night. I mean, he's in a tirade right now, right? I mean, he's defending himself and he's blasting his father-in-law, right?
Oh, God.
You demanded payment from him. There I was in the heat of the day. Verse 40, consumed me by day and night, the frost by night, and fled from my eyes. For 20 years I've worked in your household, 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks. And you have changed my wages 10 times. Maybe that's what he was talking about. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac had not been with me, certainly now you would have sent me off empty-handed. But God has seen my affliction and my hard work, and he issued his verdict last night. And he drops the mic.
Yeah.
Then Laban answered Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the sons my sons, and the flocks my flocks. Everything you see is mine, but what can I do today for these daughters of mine or for the children they have born? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I. Let it be a witness between the two of us. So Jacob picked out a stone and set it up as a marker. Then Jacob said to his relatives, gather stones. And they took stones and they made a mound. In other words, they built a little altar. Then ate there by the mound. Laban named the mound Jagar Shehadutha. Say that 10 times. Jagar Shehadutha. But Jacob named it Gilead. I don't know, but you guys have a different name here? Gilead. Then Laban said, this mound is a witness between me and you this day. Therefore the place was called Gilead and also Mizpah, for he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are out of each other's sight. If you mistreat my daughters or take other wives, though no one is with us, understand that God will be a witness between you and me. Laban also said to Jacob, look at this mound and a marker I have set up between you and me. This mound is a witness, and the marker is a witness that I will not pass beyond this mound to you, and you will not pass beyond this mound and this marker to do me harm. So they struck a covenant that they're not going to harm each other. Okay? They're going to respect each other. Verse 53, the God of Abraham and the gods of Nahor, the gods of their father, will judge between us. So basically Laban's saying between your God and the God I serve, let them judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and invited his relatives to eat a meal. So they ate a meal and they spent the night on the mountain. Laban got up early in the morning, kissed his grandchildren and daughters, and blessed them. Then Laban left to return home. Dun, dun, dun. Have it.
She got away with it.
Yeah.
Keep the idols.
So he's cut the apron strings from his father-in-law. He's left. He's got his own family now. He's back in the land of his fathers and the land of Isaac. And so everything's hunky-dory now, right? Things are going to be wonderful, right? Then he gets word that his brother Esau wanted to kill him and he's after him. And that's the next chapter.
Same time, same channel?
Something just occurred to me. So here Laban's hot after these stone idols. And God speaks to Laban and tells him what he's not supposed to do. Wouldn't it have occurred to Laban that these pieces of rock never talked to him? But the God...
But that dream, he had that dream.
Yeah, the God of Jacob did.
Yeah.
So when he said, "You just go ahead and keep that rock," you know, that's all right.
Yeah.
I mean,
You would think. Yeah, you would think.
But it doesn't appear that Laban ever makes that connection.
Doesn't make the connection.
Yeah.
It doesn't make the connection that God is a personal God. That he's not pantheistic. He's not in creation. God is not trapped by his own creation. He's outside of creation. And that's what pantheism believes. That's what a lot of pagan witchcraft and stuff believes too. They use pantheistic rituals and what do you want to call it when they do a bunch of escape room? When you speak stuff and bring it into, what's that called?
Chanting.
What?
Chanting.
Chanting and stuff like that. It all has to do with creation. They're calling creation to curse people. Usually that's what witchcraft will do. It causes the creation itself to curse people.
Incantations.
Incantation, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. They do incantations and they call on creation and the material world to actually come against and be hostile against that person they're cursing. And that's because they believed in pantheism, that God was in the material. Does that make sense? So, and that's just, you think about that, Mike, but that's kind of like, if you get stuck in a religion and you believe the religion all your life, how difficult it's got to be to come out of that unless God just basically strikes you down, and you have just a God moment where He is real. And evidently for this dream, it still wasn't enough it was enough for him to at least respect. But that's just it in pantheism. There's many gods. Gods are plural in pantheism. Not for the Jews, not for Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. There's one true God. And when He speaks, you better listen because He is God. Okay? So that's the only thing I can make out of that to even kind of even justify.
It just seemed odd.
Yeah, His God is just one of many gods.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, good question. Good comments, anything? Anybody got any comments?
That sort of thing happened with me getting married to a Baptist person, and I was a passive person, and he was a very aggressive person. And when we got married, he wanted me just to go with him to his people. I think that relates to Bible. Only it's sort of backwards because I thought I was the one that had the privilege to be with my parents, because of the sadness of getting married and living with family.
Yeah.
But
That's more prevalent in our culture today, that when you get married, usually you will go with the bride will stay closer to her parents and
But
family.
he wouldn't have it that way, and I gave in, and but it was in God's hands, I know now, because his mother and dad were very God-fearing people. And by watching their ways and their actions and the attitudes, I realized they had something in their lives I did not
That you were
have.
missing, yeah.
And see, through his beloved mother, she was the one that, watching her and listening to her, I came to know the Lord Jesus.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and I've shared this with many of you. My dad's parents made a tremendous impact on me when I was just a little grasshopper. I mean, I'd be with them and they would just talk to the Lord like he was in the room. Because for them he was. And I'm like, they start talking one day to Jesus, and I'm going, I'm looking, where's Jesus? But he was with them, and I know that planted a seed in my life that, you know, and because I love my grandparents. And to realize that they had this faith that was so strong, it made a huge impact on me. I probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my dad's grandparents. You know, that's the way it works. So, you know, Paul says, you know, some throw the seed, others water. That's a process we go through, and as our faith grows and our faith becomes our faith with God, is that many people play a part in it. So just remember that. As you walk out of here this week, you're either sowing seed or you're watering. But you make a difference, okay? Make a difference. Let people know that God is real in your life. And talk like he's real in your life.
I think it was Charles Stanley that had a program, and he was saying, we impact other people. He says, whether you like it or not.
Yes, absolutely.
It's gonna be for good or not so
Or for
good.
evil.
And he says, make it for good, of course.
Yes,
Make it
yeah.
for good.
Okay, so next week, the sibling rivalry comes back to the forefront. So Esau's coming back to get a pound of flesh. Now what's Jacob gonna do? Dun, dun, dun. See you next week.
Good job, brother. I can use help.